Hey, hey, I'm talking to you. What's a black girl doing walking alone out here at this hour? You lost sweetheart. Renfrew didn't wait for an answer. He grabbed the strap of Layla's backpack and yanked. Everything hit the sidewalk: books, pencils, her regional track ribbon, her phone charger scattering across the concrete, while a group of middle schoolers stood frozen on the opposite curb, watching. Renfrew nudged her history textbook with the toe of his boot. Then he smiled. Special Forces. Your daddy's Special Forces. Slow, loud, performative. Sure he is, baby girl. Sure he is. He picked up her track ribbon between two fingers, the one she'd won at regionals, the one she kept in her bag to feel close to her father, and dangled it in the air. This real? Or did your mama buy it at Dollar Tree to make you feel special? He dropped it back onto the concrete. Then he looked at the watching kids across the street and laughed. Little black girl telling me her daddy's a superhero. What's next? He's Batman. Layla didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't give him a single thing. Renfrew had no idea what he had just started. 48 hours later, a man in full dress uniform walked through the front doors of Cedar Falls Police Station. Every officer looked up. Not one of them made a sound. Drop your city and local time in the comments. Subscribe, because what happens next will stay with you. Cedar Falls, Ohio was the kind of town that looked perfect from a distance. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained parks, a downtown strip with a coffee shop, a hardware store, and a diner that had been open since 1967. The kind of place where people left their garage doors open on summer evenings and waved at neighbors they'd known for 20 years. From the outside, Cedar Falls looked like the kind of town where nothing bad ever happened. But Layla Brooks had grown up here. She knew better. She was 15 years old, 5'6", and ran the 400 meters faster than any girl in her school's history. Her GPA sat at 3.9, not because school came easily, but because she worked at it, the way her father had taught her, to work at everything, steadily, quietly, without needing anyone to notice. She was the kind of student teachers described as focused, the kind of teammate coaches described as reliable, and the kind of person who moved through the hallways of Cedar Falls High School with a composure that sometimes made her classmates uncomfortable, though they couldn't have explained exactly why. Her bedroom told the story better than she ever would. Track trophies lined the shelf. Above her desk, 6 of them. The most recent, from the regional qualifier, 3 weeks ago. Honor roll certificates were pinned to the corkboard above her laptop. A copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God sat on her nightstand, with a cracked spine and margin notes in purple ink. And on her desk, next to her laptop, sat a small fishbowl containing a single goldfish named Lieutenant. Layla had owned Lieutenant for 6 years, which, as anyone who has ever kept a goldfish will tell you, is medically and biologically impossible for a common goldfish living in an unfiltered bowl on a teenager's desk. Lieutenant did not appear to be aware of this. On the wall above her bed hung one photograph. Not a poster, not a collage of friends, one single framed photograph of a man in military uniform. Broad-shouldered, jaw-set eyes looking directly into the camera, with an expression that was not quite a smile, but was warmer than any formal portrait had a right to be. Colonel Marcus Brooks, her father. The photo did not hang in the living room. It did not sit on the mantel or the kitchen counter. It hung in Layla's room above her bed, where she could see it last thing at night and first thing in the morning. This was deliberate. Marcus had explained it to her when she was 9 years old, in the careful way he explained things he considered important. Some things you keep close, he had told her, not on display. The world doesn't need to know everything about you before it decides how to treat you. Give them what they've earned, nothing more. Layla had not fully understood it at 9. At 15, walking through Cedar Falls every day, she understood it completely. Marcus had been deployed for 9 months. The last time Layla heard his voice was 3 weeks ago, a satellite call that lasted 11 minutes and kept cutting out, his voice arriving in fragments across thousands of miles. He'd asked about her times. She'd told him about the regional qualifier. He'd said, "I knew you had it in you before you did." Then the connection dropped. It always dropped. Simone Brooks taught English at Cedar Falls High, the same school Layla attended, which Layla found equal parts comforting and mortifying, depending on the day. Simone was 38, precise in everything she did, and possessed of a particular kind of strength that came not from never being afraid, but from never letting fear make decisions on her behalf. Every morning before Layla left the house, Simone ran through what she called the list, though she never called it that out loud, because naming it made it feel like the threat it actually was. Headphones down when you're outside. Walk on the sidewalk, not the road. If anyone in a uniform speaks to you, stop, be polite, keep your hands visible. Don't argue, don't run. Text me when you get there. Layla recited it back the way other kids recited multiplication tables. Not because she wanted to, because she knew what happened when black kids in white neighborhoods forgot the rules. She had seen it happen. She had seen what it cost. That Thursday afternoon, she had done everything right. Track practice had ended at 4:15. She had changed out of her spikes, packed her bag, said goodbye to Jenna Castillo, her closest friend on the team, a quick-talking 15-year-old, with her mother's old Nikon always in her bag, and her father's civil rights instincts already fully formed, and walked the 6 blocks to Cedar Falls Public Library to work on her history paper. She had her headphones around her neck, not in her ears. She was on the sidewalk. She was minding her own business. She was halfway down Granger Avenue when the cruiser slowed beside her. She felt it before she saw it. The particular crawl of a vehicle matching a pedestrian's pace. Her stomach tightened the way it always did in these moments. Not panic, just recognition. The quiet, exhausting recognition of a situation she had been trained since childhood to survive. The window rolled down. Officer Todd Renfrew had been with Cedar Falls PD for 4 years. He was 34 years old, broad across the shoulders, with the kind of confidence that came from a life of very few consequences. He had done 2 years in the Army Reserves directly after high school. 8 weeks of basic a desk posting in Georgia, an honorable discharge, and he mentioned this fact often enough that people at the station had started quietly rolling their eyes when his name came up. He looked at Layla the way he looked at a lot of things in Cedar Falls, like something that didn't quite belong. "Hey," he said, "where are you headed?" Layla stopped walking. She turned toward the cruiser, hands visible at her sides. "The library, sir. I'm working on a school paper." Renfrew's eyes moved slowly from her face to her backpack, to her track shoes, still visible at the top of her bag, where she hadn't fully zipped it after practice. "You live around here?" "Yes, sir. 4 to 12 Callaway Street, 3 blocks east." He didn't move, didn't nod, just kept looking at her with that slow, assessing expression that had nothing investigative about it, and everything contemptuous. "I'm going to need you to set that bag down," he said. Layla set the bag down. "Open it." She opened it, and that was when Jenna Castillo, who had taken a different route home and was now standing at the corner of Granger and 5th with her mother's Nikon hanging from her neck, raised the camera and pressed record. Layla unzipped her backpack slowly, deliberately, the way her father had taught her to move in situations like this. No sudden gestures, no frustrated sighs, no expressions that could be misread or misrepresented later. Inside the bag, her history textbook, a spiral notebook, a water bottle, her track ribbon from regionals, a pencil case, her phone charger, and a granola bar she hadn't gotten around to eating after practice. Renfrew looked at all of it. with the expression of a man who had been hoping for something more interesting. "Empty it out," he said. "All of it, on the ground." Layla paused for just a fraction of a second. Then she reached into the bag and began placing her things on the sidewalk one by one with the same quiet precision she brought to everything. The textbook, the notebook, the water bottle, the pencil case, the granola bar, the track ribbon. Renfrew picked it up, turned it over in his hand, reading the inscription on the back: Cedar Falls Regional Qualifier First Place, 400 months, and something shifted in his expression. Not respect, something closer to its opposite. "Track," he said. "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly, like this confirmed something he'd already suspected. He set the ribbon down on top of the textbook. Then he stepped back, crossed his arms, and looked at her. "Where's your dad?" The question landed differently than the others. Layla kept her face neutral. "He's away for work, sir." "Away where?" "He's deployed." Renfrew's eyebrows lifted slightly, not in surprise, in amusement. "Deployed," he repeated. "Doing what?" Layla held his gaze. "He's in Special Forces." The silence that followed lasted about 2 seconds. Then Renfrew laughed. It started as a short exhale through the nose, the kind of sound that was almost worse than full laughter because it communicated that the thing being dismissed wasn't even worth the energy of a real response. Then it grew. He turned towards his cruiser, where Officer Dana Whitfield had just stepped out of the passenger side, and called across the roof of the car. "Whitfield, come here. You gotta hear this." Whitfield walked around the front of the cruiser. She was 29, black, 4 years on the force, and she had been doing a very careful job of looking at something slightly to the left of the situation since they had first pulled alongside Layla on Granger Avenue. "This girl says her dad's in Special Forces," Renfrew said, gesturing at Layla with an open hand, the way someone gestures at an exhibit. "Special Forces. Can you believe that?" Whitfield said nothing. She looked at Layla once, a brief, complicated look, and then looked away. Renfrew turned back to Layla, shaking his head with a wide smile. "Sweetheart, I did 2 years in the United States Army. I know what real soldiers look like. I know what their families look like. And I'm looking at you right now, standing here on this sidewalk, and I'm going to be honest with you." He leaned forward slightly. "I don't believe you." Layla said nothing. At the corner of Granger and 5th, Jenna Castillo had not lowered her camera once. "You know what I think, Renfrew?" Renfrew continued, his voice taking on the relaxed, expansive quality of a man thoroughly enjoying himself. "I think your daddy isn't deployed. I think your daddy isn't Special Forces. I think your daddy is probably sitting on a couch somewhere, and you've been telling yourself a story about him for so long that you actually believe it." He tilted his head. "Am I close?" Layla's jaw tightened, just barely, just enough to be visible to someone looking for it. She did not respond. Her father's voice was in her head, clear as a satellite call on a good connection. "Silence is not weakness. Silence is choosing your battlefield." Renfrew pulled a citation pad from his breast pocket. "I'm issuing you a citation," he said. "Obstructing pedestrian right-of-way, $85. Layla stared at him. "I was on the sidewalk. You were impeding the flow of foot traffic on a public walkway," he said, already writing. "That's a violation of Cedar Falls Municipal Code, Section 7, Paragraph 4. He tore the citation from the pad and held it out to her. "You can contest it at the municipal court office if you feel strongly about it." He said this the way people say things they know will never happen. Layla took the citation. She looked at it once. Then she folded it, placed it in the front pocket of her track jacket, and began repacking her bag. Item by item. Slowly. The textbook, the notebook, the water bottle, the pencil case, the granola bar, the track ribbon. She smoothed it out carefully before placing it back inside. When the bag was repacked and zipped, she straightened up, settled the straps on her shoulders, and looked at Renfrew one final time. She said nothing. She turned and walked toward the library. Behind her, she heard Renfrew's voice, lower now, directed at Whitfield. Special Forces. A short laugh. These kids watch too much TV. Whitfield did not respond. Jenna lowered her camera when Layla turned the corner. She looked at the footage on the small screen, scrolled back to the beginning, watched 30 seconds of it. Then she opened her messages and typed to Layla. I got all of it. Every word. What do you want me to do with it? 3 blocks away. Layla felt her phone buzz in her jacket pocket. She didn't stop walking. She didn't take the phone out. She kept her head level, her steps even, her face composed. But her hands hidden inside her jacket pockets where no one could see them were shaking. That evening, Simone Brooks sat at the kitchen table and read the citation twice. Then she set it down very carefully, the way you set something down when you are concentrating on not reacting. She looked at her daughter. Tell me everything. Layla told her everything. When she finished, Simone was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached for her phone, not her regular phone, but the other one. The one she kept in the kitchen drawer under the takeout menus. The one with only 4 numbers saved in it. She opened a message thread. She typed 3 words. It happened again. She pressed send. Then she set the phone face down on the table and waited. 4,000 miles away, in a location that did not appear on any public map, a satellite phone on a metal desk buzzed once. The man who picked it up read the message. He read it again. And then he went very, very still. By 7 o'clock the following morning, Jenna Castillo's video had 4,000 views. She had posted it the previous night to her personal account with a simple caption, "This is what happened to my friend Layla Brooks on Granger Avenue yesterday. She was walking to the library. She did nothing wrong. No hashtags, no dramatic framing. Just the facts stated plainly, with 2 minutes and 43 seconds of footage that did the rest of the work on its own." By 8:15, a civil rights account with 200,000 followers had shared it with the caption, "Cedar Falls, Ohio. A black teenage girl stopped without cause, publicly humiliated, and fined $85 for walking on a sidewalk. Her name is Layla Brooks. Remember it." Within 20 minutes of that share, the video had climbed to 30,000 views. By the time Layla sat down in her first period history class, her phone silenced in her bag per school policy had accumulated 67 notifications. She didn't look at a single one. Across town at Cedar Falls Police Station, Officer Todd Renfrew arrived for his 7:30 shift, poured himself a coffee and settled at his desk, with the particular ease of a man who had not yet understood that the ground had shifted beneath him. His desk was in many ways a self-portrait. On the left side, a framed photograph of Renfrew at the Cedar Falls Police Charity Gala. 8 months earlier, his hand extended toward Mayor Douglas Pratt, both men smiling at the camera with the comfortable smiles of people who had never been asked to account for anything. On the right side, pinned carefully to the felt divider between his workspace and the next, a certificate, printed on cream cardstock with the Cedar Falls PD seal embossed at the top. Community Hero Award, presented to Officer Todd Renfrew in recognition of outstanding service and dedication to the Cedar Falls community. It was dated 3 months ago. It faced outward toward the walkway, where everyone passing his desk could read it without trying. What the certificate did not mention, what no document in Renfrew's personnel file acknowledged, because Chief Raymond Hollis had seen to it personally, was that in the same 3-month period, 2 formal complaints had been filed against Renfrew by black residents of Cedar Falls. The first by a retired schoolteacher named Arthur Gaines, who had been stopped and questioned outside his own home on a Sunday morning. The second by a 22-year-old college student named Destiny Palmer, who had been followed for 2 blocks before being pulled over for a broken taillight that an independent mechanic later confirmed did not exist. Both complaints had been received. Both had been reviewed. Both had been quietly filed in a drawer that in Cedar Falls functioned less like a record and more like a burial ground. Renfrew opened his computer and found the video within 4 minutes. He watched it once. Then he leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and made a sound in the back of his throat that was not quite a laugh, but was close enough. "She recorded it," he said to no one in particular. Sergeant Walt Pruitt appeared at the edge of his desk, coffee in hand, expression carefully neutral. "You've seen it." "I've seen it. 60,000 views as of this morning." Renfrew shrugged. "I followed procedure. She was obstructing. The citation was lawful." Pruitt set his coffee down on the corner of the desk and looked at Renfrew with the expression of a man who had been in law enforcement for 30 years and had watched a specific category of situation unfold enough times to recognize its shape from a long way off. "Keep your head down," Pruitt said. "Don't talk to anyone outside the department about this. Don't engage online. Let it move through the news cycle." "There's nothing to engage about," Renfrew said. "I did my job." Pruitt picked up his coffee and walked away without another word. What happened next was the part Renfrew had not anticipated. He pulled up the department database and ran a search on the Brooks family standard background check, the kind he could run on anyone with a patrol officer's clearance. Simone Brooks came back clean. 15-year employment record at Cedar Falls High, no criminal history, no citations, no flags of any kind. Layla Brooks had a juvenile record so empty it barely registered as a file. Then he typed in the name he actually wanted, Marcus Brooks. The system processed for 3 seconds. Then the screen returned a single line of text centered in red. "Access denied. Security clearance required. Classification level 4. Renfrew stared at the screen. He typed the name again, more carefully this time, checking the spelling. "Access denied. Security clearance required. Classification level 4. He sat back, looked at the screen for a long moment. Then he closed the window, glanced around the office to confirm no one had been watching, and opened a different browser tab. At lunch, he told the story to 3 colleagues in the break room, his voice carrying the relaxed confidence of a man who had already decided on the conclusion and was working backward from it. The dad's probably some weekend warrior. National Guard, maybe. Did one deployment to a base in Germany, came home, told the kid he was Special Forces. He picked up his sandwich. Or he doesn't exist at all. Either way, the girl's got a fantasy. 2 of the 3 colleagues laughed. The third officer, Dana Whitfield, who had taken the seat at the far end of the table, with her back to the room, did not. She ate her lunch in complete silence, and when the break ended, she was the first one out the door. That afternoon, Renfrew drove past Cedar Falls High in his personal vehicle, a dark blue Ford Explorer with tinted rear windows, and parked across the street from the athletic entrance at 3:40 when track practice let out. He watched Layla walk out of the building with Jenna Castillo, the 2 of them talking quietly, Hoyla with her bag over one shoulder and her track spikes in her hand. He watched them part ways at the corner. He watched Layla turn east toward Callaway Street. He didn't follow. He just watched. Whitfield saw the Explorer from the station parking lot as she was leaving her shift. She recognized the plates. She stood beside her own car for a moment, keys in hand, and watched the Explorer pull away from the curb. Then she walked back inside the station, sat down at her desk, and opened a new document. At the top, she typed the date. Beneath it, she began to write. At that same moment, Jenna's video crossed 80,000 views. A producer at a regional news station in Columbus opened it on her phone, watched it twice, and forwarded it to her editor with a single line: "We need to be in Cedar Falls tomorrow." And 4,000 miles away, in a location with no name on any public map, Colonel Marcus Brooks had not slept. He sat in the narrow bunk of a forward operating base, satellite phone in hand, reading Simone's 3-word message for the 14th time. It happened again. His jaw was set. His eyes were steady. But the hand holding the phone, the hand that had held steadier things in far worse places, was not entirely still. Simone Brooks walked into Cedar Falls Police Station at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, dressed the way she dressed for parent-teacher conferences, blazer, pressed slacks, reading glasses pushed up on her head, because she had learned a long time ago that the world treated a black woman differently depending on how much effort it could dismiss her with. She carried a manila folder. Inside, a printed copy of Jenna's video, time-stamped and sourced. A written statement from Layla signed and dated. A copy of the citation. And a single sheet of paper listing in chronological order every interaction Renfrew had initiated with her daughter over the preceding week. She had done her homework. She always did her homework. Chief Raymond Hollis received her in his office with the practiced warmth of a man who had spent 30 years learning how to appear reasonable while saying nothing of substance. He was 58, silver-haired, with the careful posture of someone who had survived 4 mayoral administrations by being whatever the room needed him to be. He shook Simone's hand, offered her coffee, and gestured to the chair across from his desk, as though this were a routine meeting and not a mother sitting across from the man responsible for the officer who had humiliated her child on a public street. Simone declined the coffee. She opened her folder. She walked him through it methodically. The stop on Granger Avenue, the backpack, the citation, the public laughter. Renfrew's comments about Marcus. She placed Jenna's printed video frame, Renfrew dangling Layla's track ribbon, mouth open mid-laugh, directly in front of Hollis, and left it there. Hollis looked at it. He nodded slowly, with the expression of a man absorbing information he had already decided how to respond to. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, "I want you to know that we take community concerns extremely seriously. Officer Renfrew is a decorated member of this department with a strong service record." "I'm not here to discuss Officer Renfrew's service record," Simone said. "I'm here to contest an unlawful citation issued to my 15-year-old daughter for walking on a public sidewalk. I'm asking this department to rescind it." Hollis folded his hands on his desk. The citation was issued under a lawful municipal ordinance. Whether it was applied appropriately is a matter that would need to go through our standard review process. "How long is the standard review process?" 30 days. Simone looked at him. 30 days. That's the procedure, yes. She closed her folder. She stood up, extended her hand, shook his once, and walked out of his office without another word. In the parking lot, she sat in her car for exactly 2 minutes. She was not composing herself, she was already composed. She was thinking, calculating, deciding. Then she took out her phone and called the ACLU field office in Columbus. The intake coordinator who answered had a calm, efficient voice that reminded Simone of the way Marcus spoke when he was working. A problem, not rushed, not emotional, just systematically moving toward a solution. She took down every detail Simone provided. At the end of the call, she said, "We'll have someone reach out to you by end of business tomorrow." Then after a brief pause, she added, "I've seen the video, Mrs. Brooks. We've been watching Cedar Falls for a while." Simone thanked her and hung up. 2 days later, she received a call from the Cedar Falls Municipal Court clerk's office. The clerk informed her in the flat procedural tone of someone reading from a script that because 14 days had elapsed since the citation was issued, it had automatically escalated under Section 12B of the Cedar Falls Traffic and Pedestrian Ordinance. The fine was no longer $85. It was $340. There was also a $75 administrative processing fee. If Simone wished to formally contest the citation, she would need to file a petition with the municipal court. The filing fee was $50. Simone held the phone very carefully against her ear. "Let me make sure I understand you correctly," she said. "To contest an $85 citation that my daughter should never have received, I need to pay $50 before I can set foot in a courtroom." "That's correct," the clerk said. She said it the way people say things that have never once required them to think about what they mean. "And the total outstanding balance is now $340 plus $75 in fees." "That's correct." "For walking on a sidewalk." A pause. "The citation was issued under Section 7, Paragraph 4 of the Municipal—" "Thank you," Simone said. "I have everything I need." She hung up. She wrote down every number the clerk had given her: $340, $75, $50, and added them up at the bottom of the page. She underlined the total twice. She forwarded the page to the ACLU attorney who had contacted her that morning. Meanwhile, emboldened by Hollis's public non-action and the absence of any departmental consequence, Renfrew escalated. On Thursday afternoon, he stopped Layla again, this time at Cedar Falls Public Library, in full view of the reference desk librarian, 3 elderly men playing chess near the window, and a woman with a toddler in a stroller who had come in to return picture books. He approached Layla at her usual table, history, textbook, open notebook, beside it, highlighter in hand, and stood over her with his thumbs hooked in his belt. "You're going to need to come with me outside," he said. "I have some follow-up questions about Tuesday." Layla looked up from her textbook. "Am I being detained, sir?" "I'm asking you to step outside." "Am I being detained?" The librarian, a woman named Carol Dempsey, who had worked at Cedar Falls Public Library for 22 years and had a voice like a person who had never once been intimidated by anything, appeared at the end of the aisle. "Is there a problem here, officer?" Renfrew glanced at her. "This doesn't concern you, ma'am." "This is my library," Carol said simply. "Everything in it concerns me." The 3 chess players had turned in their chairs. The woman with the toddler had her phone out. Renfrew looked at the room. Then he looked back at Layla. "Call someone who can verify your father's service," he said, lowering his voice. "If it's real, prove it." Layla met his eyes. "I don't need to verify my father to you." He held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then he turned and walked out. Outside in the library parking lot, a woman in a gray blazer with a press badge clipped to her lapel had watched the entire exchange through the window. She had arrived in Cedar Falls that morning from Columbus. Her name was Karen Estes, and she wrote for the Dispatch, and she had been looking for the right moment to introduce herself to Simone Brooks. She had just found it. The Cedar Falls Community Center smelled like floor wax and rubber, and the particular kind of nervous energy that collects in a room full of teenagers before a competition. It was Friday afternoon. The youth track meet had drawn competitors from 4 schools across the county: Cedar Falls, Millbrook Eastside Prep, and Jefferson High, along with their coaches, parents, younger siblings, and the assorted grandparents who showed up to these things with lawn chairs and thermoses, and the absolute conviction that their grandchild was the fastest person alive. 200 people at least, maybe more. Layla had arrived at 3 o'clock with Jenna and 2 other teammates. She had checked in, pinned her number to her jersey, and done her warm-up laps with the quiet focus that her coach, a former collegiate sprinter named Beverly Holt, described as the most coachable thing she had ever seen in 15 years of working with young athletes. Layla did not warm up to be seen. She warmed up to run. At 4:17, Jenna Castillo, who was not competing today, but had come to film for the team's social media, spotted the cruiser pulling into the community center parking lot. She recognized the car before she recognized the officer. Then she recognized both. She took out her phone, opened her camera app, and pressed record without breaking stride. Renfrew entered through the main doors in full uniform, hand resting on his belt, scanning the room with the particular expression of a man who has convinced himself that what he is doing is legitimate. He spoke briefly to a volunteer at the registration table. The volunteer pointed toward the track area. Renfrew walked in that direction. Beverly Holt saw him first among the coaching staff. She stepped forward instinctively, the way coaches step in front of things they don't like the look of. "Can I help you, officer?" "I'm looking for Layla Brooks," Renfrew said. "Received a disturbance report involving a juvenile matching her description." Beverly stared at him. "Layla's been here since 3 o'clock. She hasn't left the building. I'll need to speak with her directly." "On what grounds?" But Renfrew was already moving past her. He found Layla at the far end of the track, stretching beside her starting blocks. She saw him coming from 20 feet away. She stood up slowly, straightened her jersey, and waited with her hands at her shoes. The noise in the community center did not stop all at once. It faded section by section as people noticed the officer crossing the floor toward the teenage girl in the track uniform. The way attention moves through a crowd when something is wrong, though no one can say exactly what. "Layla Brooks," Renfrew said, loud enough for the nearest 30 people to hear. "I need you to come with me." "I haven't done anything," Layla said. Her voice was steady. Her hands did not move. "There was a disturbance reported in the area earlier today. Witnesses place a juvenile matching your description at the scene." "I've been here since 3 o'clock, Layla said. "There are 200 people who can tell you that. That's something we can sort out at the station." A parent nearby said loudly, "She hasn't done anything. We've all been watching her." Someone else. "This is a children's event. You can't just—" Renfrew unclipped the handcuffs from his belt. The room went completely silent. "I am not resisting," Layla said, her voice clear and calm, each word placed deliberately, as though she knew exactly who was listening and exactly what the record would need to show. "I am asking for the legal reason for this detention." Renfrew stepped forward. "Hands behind your back." Layla complied. She did not struggle, did not cry, did not give him a single moment he could use to justify what he was doing. The handcuffs closed around her wrists. The room erupted. Coaches moved forward. Parents shouted. 3 people raised phones. And Jenna Castillo, who had been recording from the moment Renfrew walked through the door, switched from camera to live stream without lowering the phone and watched the viewer count climb to 300, then 1,000, then 5,000 within the first 4 minutes. Beverly Holt stepped directly in front of Renfrew. "You release that girl right now. She has done nothing. I will be on the phone with the department and with our attorney before you reach your car." Renfrew looked at her. "Stand aside, ma'am." Beverly did not stand aside. Renfrew walked around her, one hand on Layla's arm, steering her toward the exit. Layla walked. She kept her chin up. She kept her eyes forward. And in the 15 seconds it took to cross from the track to the door, not one person in that building said a single word. Because sometimes silence is not indifference. Sometimes silence is 200 people collectively holding their breath because they are watching something they know is wrong and cannot yet find the words large enough to match it. At home, Simone's phone rang at 4:22. She was in the kitchen grading papers at the table. She saw Beverly Holt's name on the screen and answered before the second ring. She was in her car before Beverly finished the first sentence. She remembered to turn off the stove. She forgot to feed Lieutenant. Lieutenant did not seem to mind. At the station, Renfrew led Layla into a small room off the main corridor. Not an interrogation room, technically, just a room with a table and 2 chairs and a door that closed, and sat down across from her, with the expression of a man who believed he had finally engineered the situation he wanted. Layla sat with her hands folded on the table, the handcuff marks still faint on her wrists. "You want to tell me where your father really is?" Renfrew said. Layla looked at him. "He's coming home." Renfrew leaned back. "Sure he is." He smiled. "That's what you keep saying." In the main corridor, Sergeant Walt Pruitt's desk phone rang. He picked it up. He listened. His face, which had maintained the careful neutrality of a career officer for the better part of 30 years, changed. He set the phone down very carefully. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked more quickly than he usually moved toward Chief Hollis's office. He knocked once and opened the door without waiting for an answer. Hollis looked up from his desk. "What?" Pruitt stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Chief," he said, and his voice had a quality in it that Hollis had not heard before, something between warning and fear. "There's a man at the front desk." "What kind of man?" Hollis said. Pruitt had been a sergeant for 19 years. He had delivered difficult news to chiefs, mayors, and once memorably to a sitting state senator. He was not a man who struggled to find words. But he stood in Hollis's doorway for a full 3 seconds before he spoke. "Military ID," he said. "Red stripe." Hollis went still. In the 30 years Raymond Hollis had spent in law enforcement, he had seen a standard military ID exactly once. He had seen a government contractor ID twice. He had seen a federal badge more times than he could count. But a red stripe military ID, the kind that existed at a classification level, most career law enforcement officers retired without ever encountering, he had seen exactly once. 12 years ago, when a man had walked into his previous precinct in Dayton and ended a 4-month investigation with a single quiet conversation. He still remembered how that felt. "How many medals?" Hollis asked. Pruitt held up 4 fingers. Hollis stood up from his desk. The front desk of Cedar Falls Police Station was a wide-open counter staffed by Officer Pete Grady, 26 years old, 2 years on the force, who had been looking forward to a quiet Friday afternoon. The man standing on the other side of the counter was not loud. He was not agitated. I was not demanding anything. He was simply standing there, and somehow without doing any of those things, he was the most commanding presence in the room. Colonel Marcus Brooks was 43 years old. He stood 6'2" in his dress uniform, Army service uniform, Class A, every element in its precisely regulated place. The jacket was dark green and immaculate. The brass was polished to a depth that caught the fluorescent light and held it. On his chest, arranged in the exact order prescribed by Army Regulation 670-1, were 4 rows of service ribbons and medals. The combat infantryman badge above them, the Ranger tab on his left shoulder, the Special Forces tab beside it, and pinned at the center of his chest, above everything else, the decoration that had made Pruitt's voice go quiet when he called Hollis. Officer Grady had been staring at it for 90 seconds, and still could not fully process what he was looking at. "Sir," Grady said, and his voice came out about half an octave higher than he intended. Can I help you?" "My name is Colonel Marcus Brooks," the man said. His voice was deep and even with the quality of something that had been measured and found to be exactly sufficient, not loud, not soft, just precisely calibrated to be heard and understood. My daughter is Layla Brooks. I understand she's being held in this building. I'd like to see her. Grady looked at the ID that had been placed on the counter in front of him. He looked at the red stripe along its border. He looked at the photo, and then at the man, and then back at the photo. "One moment, sir," he said. I'm going to get the sergeant." "That would be fine," Marcus said. He did not lean on the counter. He did not check his phone. He stood with his hands at his sides and waited, and every officer who passed through the front corridor, in the next 90 seconds, found a reason to slow down slightly as they went. Hollis arrived first, Pruitt 2 steps behind him. Hollis extended his hand across the counter with the careful smile of a man recalibrating rapidly. "Colonel Brooks, I'm Chief Raymond Hollis. I want to—" "Room number," Marcus said. Not aggressively. Not rudely. Simply as a man who had assessed the situation and determined that pleasantries were not the most efficient use of the next 60 seconds. Hollis's extended hand came back down. He looked at Pruitt. Pruitt looked at the floor. "This way," Hollis said. Marcus Brooks walked through Cedar Falls Police Station, the way he moved through every space that required navigation, with complete awareness of everything around him, and complete indifference to what it thought of him. Officers at their desks looked up. A woman from the administrative office stepped out of a doorway and then stepped back. 2 officers near the coffee station stopped talking mid-sentence. Nobody said anything. Nobody moved to stop him. Hollis led him to the room off the main corridor and opened the door. Renfrew looked up from across the table. What happened to his face in the next 2 seconds was not a single expression, but a sequence surprise, then something like recognition, then a rapid and unsuccessful attempt at composure that left him looking like a man trying to close a door that was already off its hinges. Marcus did not look at Renfrew. He looked at his daughter. Layla was sitting with her hands folded on the table. Her track jersey still on the faint marks from the handcuffs, still visible on her wrists. When the door opened, she looked up, and for one unguarded moment, the briefest fracture in the composure she had maintained for the past 2 hours. Something crossed her face that was not quite relief and not quite grief, but was made of both. "Hey Z," Marcus said. His voice was quiet. Just for her. "Hey Dad." He crossed the room in 4 steps, looked at her wrists, looked at her face, placed one hand briefly on her shoulder, a gesture more complete than any speech. "You okay?" "Yes, sir." A pause. "Kept my head level." "I know you did." He held her gaze for 1 more second. Then he straightened up and turned around. Renfrew was still sitting at the table. He had not stood up. He appeared to have forgotten how. Marcus looked at him, and the room, which had already been quiet, became a different kind of quiet, entirely. The kind that has weight to it. "Officer Renfrew," Marcus said. His voice had not changed in volume or temperature. It was still even, still measured. "I've spent the last 21 years in rooms with men who had every reason in the world to be dangerous. Warlords, militants, people operating in places where human life was treated as a variable." He paused. "Not one of them spoke to a child the way you spoke to my daughter on that sidewalk." Renfrew opened his mouth. Marcus continued without raising his voice by a single degree. "So I'm going to ask you one time calmly as one person to another. What exactly did my daughter do to deserve this?" The silence that followed was absolute. Renfrew's mouth was still open. Nothing came out. Renfrew found his voice eventually. It came out smaller than he intended. "She was obstructing. There was a disturbance report." There was no disturbance report, Marcus said. We both know that. The words landed without heat. That was the thing about the way Marcus Brooks spoke. There was no anger in it, which somehow made it worse. Anger could be dismissed. Anger could be reframed. What Marcus deployed was something older and more durable than anger. It was certainty. And certainty in a room full of people who were no longer certain of anything had a particular kind of gravity. Marcus placed a folder on the table. He did not slam it. He set it down the way you set down something you have carried a long distance and are finally deliberately putting in its permanent place. Inside, a formal Pentagon notification generated 14 hours after Simone's 3-word message had reached a satellite phone 4,000 miles away. A legal brief prepared by a JAG attorney whose name was preceded by the word Colonel. Printed screenshots of Jenna's videos time-stamped and annotated. A copy of every public record associated with the citation, including the escalation to $340, the $75 processing fee, and the $50 filing cost that stood between Simone Brooks and a courtroom. And at the back of the folder, a single sheet of paper that Hollis leaned forward to read and then leaned back from very carefully, as though proximity to it required a clearance he did not possess. "This department," Marcus said, addressing Hollis, now his voice unchanged, "issued my daughter an $85 citation for walking on a public sidewalk. It detained her twice without cause. It arrested her at a youth sporting event in handcuffs in front of 200 people on the basis of a disturbance report that did not exist." He looked at Hollis. "I need to understand if this is a policy or a pattern." Hollis opened his mouth, closed it. He looked like a man trying to locate an answer in a room where all the answers had been removed. The door opened. Officer Dana Whitfield stepped in. She was still in uniform, having come directly from her shift. In her hand was a document, 11 pages printed and stapled with a date at the top of each page going back 4 months. She walked to Hollis's side of the table and placed it in front of him without a word. Hollis looked at the first page, then the second. Then he stopped reading and simply stared at the paper. It was Whitfield's record. Every incident she had witnessed, documented with the quiet, systematic thoroughness of someone who had known for a long time that the day would come when it needed to exist. Renfrew following the college student for 2 blocks before pulling her over. Renfrew's comments in the break room. The 2 buried complaints from black residents. Every date. Every location. Every word she had heard and written down and saved. Signed at the bottom in blue ink, Officer Dana Whitfield, badge 2291. Renfrew stared at her. You've been documenting," Whitfield said. "Yes." The ACLU attorney arrived 6 minutes later. Renfrew's suspension was formalized before the hour was out. He was escorted from the building by Pruitt and a second officer, not roughly, not dramatically, just firmly and finally. The way you remove something that has been in the wrong place for too long. He passed Marcus in the corridor. Their eyes met for 1 second. Renfrew looked away first. Marcus did not look away at all. He simply watched Renfrew go with the expression of a man noting the conclusion shown of something that had already been decided. Outside, Karen Estes was waiting with a camera crew from Columbus and a notebook she had been filling since Tuesday morning. The Brooks family walked out together, Marcus, Simone, and Layla still in her track jersey, the number still pinned to her chest. The late afternoon light caught the brass on Marcus's uniform and held it. A reporter stepped forward with a microphone. "Colonel Brooks, do you have a statement for the department?" Marcus looked at the cameras briefly. "My statement is in the folder I left on the table in there. Everything else will go through proper channels." He started walking toward the car. The same reporter turned to Layla. "Layla, how did you manage to stay so calm through all of this?" Layla glanced at her father. Then she looked at the camera. "He taught me that dignity isn't something someone can take from you," she said. "You have to give it away." And I wasn't giving it away. Behind them, Chief Hollis emerged for what he had clearly decided would be a measured, reassuring public statement. He stood before the cameras with his prepared expression and read from a card. "The Cedar Falls Police Department takes all community concerns seriously. Officer Renfrew has been placed on administrative leave as a precautionary measure while we review the circumstances of this incident." A reporter asked, "Will the department be issuing an apology to the Brooks family?" Hollis paused. He looked at his card. "We will be issuing a statement of acknowledgement at the appropriate time." Not an apology. A statement of acknowledgement. Simone, who was 5 steps from the car, stopped walking. She turned around slowly. Every journalist in that parking lot, by some collective instinct, pointed their microphone toward her. "A statement of acknowledgement," she repeated. Her voice was perfectly, devastatingly level. "My daughter was handcuffed at a children's track meet, in front of her teammates, in front of children, in front of 200 people who did nothing wrong except watch something happen that they knew was wrong." She let the silence sit for exactly 3 seconds. "And the department is offering a statement of acknowledgement." She looked directly into the nearest camera. "Write that down," she said. Then she turned, got in the car, and closed the door. The clip was shared 400,000 times before midnight. By Saturday morning, Cedar Falls was no longer a small Midwestern city that looked perfect from a distance. It was a story. Jenna Castillo's original video, the one she had posted Tuesday evening, with a plain caption and no hashtags, had reached 4.2 million views overnight. The clip of Simone Brooks in the parking lot had been picked up by every major news network by 6 a.m. By 8, it had been viewed an additional 2 million times on platforms Jenna had never heard of. By 10, Layla Brooks's name was the 3rd most searched term in the United States. Layla, for her part, ate cereal at the kitchen table and did not look at her phone. Marcus sat across from her with a cup of coffee, watching her with the quiet attention of a man who had spent 21 years learning to observe what people did when they thought the pressure was off. "You know it's going to get louder before it gets quiet," he said. "I know," Layla said. "You ready for loud?" She looked up at him. "You trained me for loud." He smiled, the real one, the one Simone said looked exactly like his father, and drank his coffee. The Pentagon press office released a statement at 9:45 a.m. It was 4 sentences long, measured in the specific way that 4-sentence Pentagon statements are always measured, and it confirmed without elaborating that Colonel Marcus Brooks was an active duty officer with a distinguished service record, and that the Department of the Army was monitoring the situation in Cedar Falls with interest. 4 sentences. That was all. But anyone who understood how the Pentagon communicated understood what those 4 sentences meant. The Department of the Army did not monitor local police incidents, not unless the incident had crossed a threshold that most local police incidents never came close to. The phone in Chief Hollis's office began ringing at 10:15 and did not stop. By noon, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division had opened a formal inquiry into Cedar Falls PD. The inquiry was not a suggestion. It was not a review. It was a formal federal investigation, and its first exhibit, the document filed with the clerk's office, confirming the escalation of Layla's citation from $85 to $340 plus fees, was already being circulated among civil rights attorneys as a textbook example of punitive bureaucratic machinery operating against a black family that had done nothing except challenge an unlawful police action. The filing caused a specific kind of outrage quiet, focused the kind that lasts longer than the louder variety, because there was no villain in Section 12B of the Cedar Falls Traffic and Pedestrian Ordinance. It was just a rule that existed, that had been applied, that had turned an $85 injustice into a $465 one through the simple mechanism of time passing. Nobody had made a decision. The system had simply done what systems do when nobody is watching them closely enough. People watched it closely now. Renfrew's personnel file was unsealed as part of the federal inquiry on Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, it had been leaked in its entirety to Karen Estes, who published a reconstruction in the Columbus Dispatch that ran to 3,200 words and cited every document by its official record number. The file contained the 2 buried complaints from Arthur Gaines and Destiny Palmer. 3 use of force incidents in 4 years, all reviewed internally and all cleared. A supervisor's note from 18 months ago, written by Pruitt, who had apparently harbored doubts long before he began issuing warnings, describing Renfrew as prone to escalation in low-stakes civilian encounters, particularly with minority residents. The note had been filed. Nothing had been done. The Community Hero Certificate stayed on the wall of Cedar Falls PD for exactly 48 hours after the dispatch piece ran. Then someone no one ever confirmed who took it down. The burner phone used to generate the false disturbance report that had preceded Layla's arrest at the track meet was traced on Wednesday. It had been purchased with cash at a drugstore on Clement Avenue, 2 blocks and 4 minutes on foot from Cedar Falls Police Station on the morning of the day it was used. Security footage from the drugstore was subpoenaed as part of the federal investigation. Renfrew was charged on Thursday. The charges were read in a federal courtroom in Columbus, with Renfrew seated at the defense table in a gray suit, looking like a man who had recently lost weight and was not sure where he had put it. Filing a false police report. Misuse of law enforcement authority. 2 counts of civil rights violation under 18 U.S.C. 242, which covers the willful deprivation of constitutional rights under color of law. His attorney entered a plea of not guilty. Chief Hollis appeared before the Cedar Falls City Council on Friday afternoon. The session lasted 3 hours and 20 minutes. At the end of it, Hollis announced his resignation, effective immediately, in a statement that used the phrase, "to pursue other opportunities," and did not contain the word apology. Officer Dana Whitfield was named interim community liaison by the acting chief, a reform-minded captain from a neighboring district named Sandra Reeves, who had been brought in specifically at the request of the federal inquiry. Whitfield accepted the role with the same quiet thoroughness she had brought to everything else. That Saturday, Pastor Gloria Covington opened the doors of Riverside Community Church at 6 p.m. for what she called a community conversation, not a protest, not a rally, just people sitting in the same room together, trying to find a way forward. She had expected perhaps 60 people. 412 showed up. Marcus sat in the 3rd row from the back. Not at the podium, not at the front of the room. Just a Cedar Falls resident in civilian clothes listening. When Layla was invited to speak, she walked to the microphone without notes. "I want to say something simple," she said, looking out at the 400 faces in that church. "I wasn't asking Officer Renfrew to believe my dad. I wasn't asking him to respect my dad. I was asking him to see me. Just me. A 15-year-old girl walking to the library." She paused. "That's all it was, and that's all it should have needed to be." The church was absolutely silent. Then, from somewhere near the back, someone began to clap, and then someone else, and then the whole room all at once, like something that had been held in finally finding the space to move. After the meeting, as people filed out into the cool October evening, an older man made his way through the crowd toward Marcus. He was 61, broad across the shoulders, with the particular way of moving that people who have spent significant time in military service never quite lose. He extended his hand. "Colonel." Marcus looked at him. Something in the man's posture communicated itself before his words did. "Frank Delgado," the man said. "Retired. 75th Ranger Regiment. I've lived in Cedar Falls for 12 years. He held Marcus's gaze. "Didn't know we had company in this town." Marcus shook his hand. "Good town," Marcus said quietly, glancing back at the church, the light still visible through its open doors. "Worth protecting." 6 months passed. They passed the way time passes after something that has permanently altered the shape of a place, not quickly, not slowly, but with the particular weight of a community that is doing the difficult, unglamorous work of becoming something different from what it was. Cedar Falls Police Department underwent its most significant structural reform in 30 years. But a sustained 12-week program developed in partnership with the Civil Rights Division and 3 community organizations that had been asking for exactly this for longer than anyone in the department had been willing to listen. A civilian oversight board was established with genuine authority, the power to review complaints, compel testimony, and recommend disciplinary action independent of the chain of command. The board's first chair was Arthur Gaines, the retired schoolteacher, whose complaint against Renfrew had been buried 18 months earlier. Gaines accepted the position with the calm of a man who had learned over 8 decades not to be surprised when justice arrived late, only grateful when it arrived at all. The citation, the original $85 citation, issued to a 15-year-old girl for walking on a public sidewalk on a Thursday afternoon, was officially vacated on a Tuesday morning in February in a brief administrative proceeding that lasted less time than it had taken Renfrew to write it. The city of Cedar Falls issued a formal written apology to the Brooks family 3 days later. It was 4 paragraphs long, signed by the acting mayor, and used the word apology 6 times. Simone received it by certified mail on a Friday afternoon. She read it at the kitchen table. She read it twice. Then she folded it along its original creases and slid it carefully into the second drawer of the kitchen dresser, beneath the takeout menus, and beside the phone she no longer needed to keep hidden. "It doesn't fix anything," she said. Layla, sitting across from her, with Lieutenant's fishbowl on the counter behind her. Lieutenant, still alive, still thriving, still apparently operating outside the known biological constraints of his species, looked up from her history textbook. "But," she said. Simone looked at her daughter. "But it's a start." Todd Renfrew was convicted on all 4 counts in a federal courtroom in Columbus on a Wednesday in March. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 11 minutes. When the foreperson read the verdict, Renfrew sat very still at the defense table, and the expression on his face was not the defiance he had carried through 4 years of unchecked behavior, or the contempt he had worn on Granger Avenue when he laughed at a 15-year-old girl's quiet statement of fact. It was something smaller and colder than either of those things. It was the expression of a man who had finally arrived at the full cost of what he had done and found it larger than he had budgeted for. I was sentenced to 18 months in federal custody and permanently decertified as a law enforcement officer in the state of Ohio. He would never carry a badge again. Jenna Castillo received the Ohio Youth Journalism Award in April. The citation, accompanying the award, described her work as an act of civic documentation that demonstrated the power of bearing witness and the responsibility that comes with it. She accepted the award in a green dress, with her parents in the front row and her camera bag over her shoulder, because she had come directly from shooting a piece for the school paper and had not had time to put it down. In her acceptance speech, she said, "I didn't do anything brave. I just didn't put the camera away." Layla Brooks is the one who was brave. She was brave every single day that I only had to film. Layla in the audience looked at the floor. In May, Layla ran the 400 meters at the Ohio State Junior Championships. She had been training since January, with the focused, unhurried discipline that had always been her defining characteristic, not training to prove something, not training to answer anyone, just training because she was a runner and running was what she did. Beverly Holt had told her in February that her times were the best the program had ever seen at her age. Layla had nodded and asked what she needed to work on. The day of the championship was clear and cool. The stadium held 3,000 people. Marcus was in the stands in civilian clothes, jeans, a gray jacket, no uniform, no medals, seated in the 5th row on the far side with Simone beside him. He had his arms folded and his eyes on the track, with the complete undivided attention he brought to things that mattered. When Layla crossed the finish line first, by a margin that made the announcer's voice climb involuntarily, Marcus stood up. He did not shout. He did not pump his fist. He simply stood hands together and watched his daughter stop at the end of the track, bend forward with her hands on her knees and breathe. Then she straightened up, and she looked into the stands until she found him. He raised one hand. She raised hers back. That summer, the framed photograph of Marcus in uniform moved from Layla's bedroom wall to the living room mantel. It was Layla's idea. She carried it downstairs herself one Saturday morning and set it in the center of the mantel, between a candle and a small vase of flowers, and stood back and looked at it. Simone appeared in the doorway. She looked at the photograph, then at Layla. "You sure? Some things you keep close," Layla said, "but some things are worth showing."
Careful.
In August, the Cedar Falls Gazette ran a profile on Marcus, the first time he had agreed to speak on the record to a local publication. The reporter asked him what he wanted people to take away from everything that had happened. Marcus thought about it for a moment. "My daughter never needed me to walk in and save her," he said. "She had already handled it. Every single day she handled it. I just needed to make sure the record was complete." He paused. "The record is complete now, Oshun." On the last day of August, Layla walked the same 6 blocks from Cedar Falls High to the public library to work on a paper. Same route, same afternoon light, same backpack over one shoulder. Mrs. Dempsey, the librarian, waved from the window when she saw her coming. A woman walking her dog on Granger Avenue called her name and smiled. 2 kids from the middle school across the street recognized her and stopped to stare, not with suspicion, but with the particular wide-eyed attention that teenagers give to people they have decided to admire. No cruiser slowed beside her. Nobody stopped her. She walked through the library doors, chose her usual table by the far window, set down her bag, and opened her history textbook. Outside Cedar Falls looked the way it always had: tree-lined streets, a hardware store, a diner that had been open since 1967. The kind of town where, from a distance, everything looked fine. But something had changed. Not everything. Not enough. But something real and measurable and hard-won. Layla uncapped her highlighter and began to read. "Dignity is not given to you by the people who respect you. It is built quietly in every moment you choose not to become what injustice is trying to make you." Layla Brooks never raised her voice, never lost her composure, never gave anyone the version of herself they were trying to provoke. That is not weakness. That is the oldest and most unbreakable kind of strength there is. If this story stayed with you, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe that stories like this one deserve to be heard, subscribe. There are more voices that need an audience. Help us find them.